What the world is watching.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Tap Out Talk. I'm your host, Bryan, the Hype Ballard, back at it again, and I am with a very special guest today, the two-time Intercontinental Champion, two-time WWF Tag Team Champion, Hall of Famer, and one heck of a living legend, Tito Santana. Tito, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on today. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing good, Bryan, and I'm looking forward to talking to your fans here. It's going to be a good show.
It's going to be a great show. I agree. We got a lot of great questions from the fans, and we'll kind of filter those in later on here. I want to start out, where all things great start, the start in life and the start in wrestling. And some people say it really begins when you go out on your own at college, right? And we're going to West Texas State, where you had quite a football career as tight end there. And I want to get your initial thoughts on that.
Well, I did end up having a great career, at West Texas State. I loved playing football there. Met some great friends from all over the country. We had some good years and we had some bad years, but because I was playing football at West Texas State, I made some connections. I wasn't looking to become a professional wrestler, but I did make some connections. Terry Funk used to come by the sideline and watch our practices and games, and then Tully Blanchard came into the picture. He transferred from another school, and we became friends, and they ended up talking me into becoming a professional wrestler.
And it's crazy you mentioned that, because that football team was stacked with wrestlers. I mean, you had Ted DiBiase Jr. I believe Tully Blanchard was your quarterback. Is that correct?
Yeah, Tully Blanchard was our quarterback.
Yeah, and so who all was on there? Remind me, because I know there was Stan Hansen. I know there's quite a few that were in there.
Stan Hansen was before me. Stan Hansen was the tight end coach, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So he was my coach my freshman year. He didn't know much about tight ends, but he used to push the heck out of me. He was a good motivator. You had the Funks. You had Dusty Rhodes, Blackjack Mulligan, Barry Windham, Manny Fernandez, Bruiser Brody, Bobby Duncombe, Stan Hansen, and just I'm pretty sure there's a couple more that I've left out, but there was a lot of guys that that went to West Texas State that got into professional wrestling and had a great career.
Yeah, and when I was reading that, I was kind of had to double check my facts, because I couldn't believe all those guys were all from that one area. And you had an amazing career there. I do kind of want to ask, like, what would just be any great advice you'd have to any NCAA athlete, anybody getting into college sports, and if you had some good advice for that? And I know a lot of them will watch and listen to this.
Well, to me, professional athletes come from all kinds of different schools. You find them in small schools, you find them in the bigger schools, and it's all about a dream. I think if you have a dream, and especially now, you got to work at it. You got to put the time. Everybody is getting extra help with the professional trainers, and you got to do all that. To be successful in professional sports.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed. And going from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, in college, playing with him, and then going to your own dream in the NFL, you were able to make it your way to the Kansas City Chiefs, right?
Yeah, I was a free agent. I was there. I played every preseason game, and I had an injury before I got to the Kansas City Chiefs, which I had to really tape my ankle up. I turned in a real bad 40 time. And when the coach cut me at the end of the preseason games, he says, Mercedes says, you're a hell of an athlete, but you're slow. I never brought up the fact by the time that I got cut, I was back up speed. I should have asked to be retimed in the 40, but I didn't. And I ended up going to, the BC Lions. Coach Campbell helped me get to the BC Lions, and which ended up being a pretty good thing for me.
Yeah. What did you like most about going to the Lions?
Well, what I liked the most is, the tryout that they gave us when I got there. The head coach, there was a guy. He was a defensive end. I can't remember his name. That got cut from Minnesota, the Vikings, and he says, "Okay, line up." So I came from a wishbone offense, so I was a pretty good blocker. So he says, "Okay." He says, "You guys are going to go up against each other." So, the coach referee blew the whistle, and I knocked him on his butt 3 times. And the coach says, "Okay, you go back to the hotel and get dressed. And Tito, Merced, you're going to stay." That was my tryout for the BC Lions.
So, you were at kind of a turning point there where you, at one point, considered maybe not football and maybe wrestling, but then you ended up going with football. Was there kind of like a tough choice to make there before you ultimately went to wrestling?
Well, you're right. I finished that season, came back, played a full year the next year, and I had just signed a 1-year contract, a 3-year consecutive 1-year contracts with the BC Lions. And Joe Blanchard had told me, he says, "Merced, you could be making quite a bit more money in professional wrestling." I didn't understand. I thought I was going to get a contract just like I did in professional wrestling. Little did I know, I started training, and I wasn't making any money. I was living in Florida with Tully Blanchard. We were sharing an apartment, and I was ready to give it up. Terry Funk was a world champion. He came in to wrestle Dusty Rhodes in Tampa, and he called me into the locker room, and he says, how are you liking it, my boy?" How Terry Funk used to talk. "How you liking it, my boy?" And I said, I like it. I said, "But, I don't know that I can afford to keep paying rent for an apartment." And he says, "Let me talk to Eddie Graham." Eddie Graham was a promoter in Tampa, Florida. And so I waited. In the morning, they called me up to the office, and I started getting some bookings. And before you know it, I'm on my way to Tampa, to Atlanta, Georgia. And then I was there for 8 months, and I went to North Carolina, Charlotte, had a great professional wrestling there. And that was the beginning of my career. I had to start from the bottom. I didn't know anything about wrestling, and it was very, very hard for me to get started because, I didn't know anything. So I had to learn how to crawl and then walk and then run. But I started picking it up pretty quick once I got going.
And a lot of that was with Hiro Matsuda, right? Correct. You started training.
Yeah, Hiro Matsuda was a trainer, and I always heard some horror stories about Hiro Matsuda, that he was so tough, and I don't know what it was about me that he worked me hard, but he didn't never try to hurt me. I think he liked me.
It's always good when the trainer takes a good interest in you. I've heard those stories that you've mentioned as well, and I know there's been some other talent that have also written about it in their books. But I always feel like a trainer gives you what you could handle, or what you need, and not necessarily,
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it has to do with your attitude. He wasn't a big man, but you wouldn't want to mess with him. He'd stretch you and make you squeal in a heartbeat. Yeah. So I was an athlete. I just got done playing football. I was weighing about 230, in great shape, and I had a very humble attitude, and I think that had a lot to do with it.
And the training. So you said you started at the basic level. That's running the ropes, and that's starting out with the really basics, right?
Running the ropes, doing a ton of squats before you even got started. running, a couple of miles before you came into the ring. They wanted to see if you could. But I was a good athlete, so I knew how to train.
Yeah.
If you were willing to put the work that it took to be, a professional wrestler, and once he saw that I was willing, because the simple job of hitting the ropes, I remember, the first week, my whole ride, because you hit the ropes with the right side, the whole ride was black and blue, from those ropes are thick and hard, and and you have to learn how to hit the ropes, over and over and over. You develop a callus on your side, the whole side.
So when you went back to your apartment, you slept on your left side that first week, right?
I can't even remember by the time I hit the sack, man, I was tired. So I don't know what side I was sleeping in.
That's funny. And then, of course, you worked so hard at that. And again, being an athlete helps. I think that always helps. When you have an athlete mentality, it helps you transition to not just in sports, but in life, right? And I feel like that work ethic is one of the most important things. But what would you say is one of the most important things of that is?
Well, I think being an athlete makes you competitive, and I would look like the professional wrestlers that were on the road. You had Dick Slater, you had Steve Kern, you had Mike Graham. All those guys were in good shape. They were in good physical shape, and they all trained. I mean, they were getting in shape physically, and they were lifting weights. And I enjoyed lifting weights, but I didn't really get into lifting weights until I became a professional wrestler. All these guys, when I got on the road, the first thing we would do in the morning, go to the gym, and spend an hour and a half, lifting weights. We were doing it 6 days a week, and if you take care of yourself, I didn't look. I mean, I was 225, 230, but I didn't look like I look in this picture here. I wasn't as muscular, as I got later on.
Yeah, and it's when you train, then ultimately you got your first match. What was going through your mind, and what was like really just kind of give me the raw thoughts of, okay, I got my first match. I'm in front of a live crowd. How'd it go?
Well, I was in great shape. I mean, conditioning wise, I was as good as I'd ever been in my life. And I wrestled a guy that was about 300 pounds. And, in professional wrestling, they gave us a time we had to go. They gave us a 10-minute draw on television. That was my very first match. I can't remember the guy's name. But let me tell you, the intensity of the match and just having the fans, all around the ring, watching you so close, it was like the minute you got into the ring, it was like you were fighting the force, and I mean, in 10 minutes, I was exhausted. I just couldn't think how can this fat guy, 300-pound guy, be in better shape than me, because he wasn't blowing up like I was. By the time the 10 minutes, by the time the bell rang for a draw, I was so happy that the bell rang. I came into the locker room. I hit the floor, man, and I just, hit the cement, and I was just so happy that I was still breathing, because I guess the intensity of the match, and the wrestling fans being there made the big difference.
Well, there's a lot of emotion there too, right? Because it's the first, and you're like, yeah, I want to do a good job. I want to be welcomed back. I have a lot of indie wrestlers that, follow me on social media. And what advice would you give to the indie wrestlers that are trying to make it in the business?
Well, my advice is, if you're going to go for it, you got to go for it. you got to get the ring experience. You got to get into the ring and experience the reaction of the fans, whether you know what you're doing. I mean, I wrestled guys that weren't that good, and I felt like I didn't learn anything. But you do learn something every time you get into the ring. But sometimes you feel like you're going forward, and then sometimes you feel like, man, I had a horrible match. Everything that I thought I knew didn't work, but it was because it was a different opponent. But if you're gonna go for it, you got to go for it. If you have to travel, 300 miles to have a match, and I traveled 300 miles to have a match and spend more money than what I got paid. But I was getting ring experience, and that accounted for something. Every time I stepped into the ring, I learned something.
Yeah.
When I was in wrestling, I was looking through the curtains, watching, the other guys. Whenever I wrestled, I go to somebody who was more experienced than myself, and I say, "Do you mind watching my match and give me some constructive criticism?" And I was an athlete, and when somebody gives you constructive criticism, and they tell you that you're not doing this right, and you're an athlete, it kind of hurts. It hurts to hear the truth. Somebody that's seeing you, that's being honest, that tells you, you're not doing this right. You got to change it.
I just literally had that conversation with my own kid, where I told her, because she's a college athlete, and I told her, I said, if somebody's giving you time to give you criticism, it means they care about you.
Right.
And they care about you, because they won't even bother with you if they don't care about you or think you're worth it. So,
well, they're not going to listen to the parents anyway.
Well, they don't listen to me, right? Daughters listen to dads. I don't know what it is, but so you did all that training, you did the right work, and then welcome to the WWF, right? You did a lot of wrestling in that time, but then you got your first call to the WWF in 1979, I believe it was, right? And so how did that initial contact happen? How did you get there?
Well, I left Charlotte. I think was Charlotte the Midwest. I forgot what federation. It was a very good federation. I was there for about a year. I got great experience. First Atlanta, Georgia, then Charlotte. Then I went to Amarillo, Texas. Terry Funk had sold, the Funks had sold their federation or their territory to Blackjack Mulligan and Dick Murdoch. And Blackjack Mulligan really wanted to give me a big push, because he says, we're going to make you an international star. The fact that I was Hispanic, excuse me. And my very first TV taping that I got there, Blackjack Mulligan was owners with Dick Murdoch. Well, Blackjack Mulligan was the one that wanted to push me, and he was the heel, and he was out of town. Dick Murdoch was running the show, and he was a baby face, and he didn't want anybody to get over above him. So my first TV taping, I wrestled Sten Lane, and Sten Lane was just getting started, and Sten Lane was also supposed to be getting a push, but we were new. The fans didn't know us, and Dick Murdoch says, you guys are going to go have a 10-minute draw. Well, by that time, I had seen other stars come into territories, and when they were going to push them, they were not going draws on television. They were getting wins on TV. So right away, I said to myself, they don't have any plans for me here, And I was there about 2.5 months. Luckily, Andre the Giant came in. I had become friends with Andre the Giant, and I told Andre, I said, Andre, they're not doing me right here. They're not doing anything with me.
Yeah.
I used a few different words than that. But unknown to me, Mario Savoldi his father was Angelo Savoldi here in New Jersey, was an agent for Vince McMahon Sr. here at the WWF. Mario gave Andre a match so Vince Sr. could see my match. Andre the Giant carried it back with him and gave it to Vince McMahon. And before you know it, I get a call from Vince McMahon, and I'm on my way to New York.
And that was Vince Sr., right?
Vince Sr., yeah.
Vince Sr., yeah. And you didn't know Andre was doing that for you. He just kind of did that behind the scene a little bit. And
yeah, I didn't find that out until a couple of years later. You know, 'cause me and Andre, we were really good friends. I played a lot of cribbage with him, a lot of different cards. You know, played with him. We would travel to Japan, and he'd be first class. He'd upgrade me to first class so I could play cards with him. And you know, we hung out together. I partied with him. I mean, there was no way that I could keep up with him, but I tried, and I think that's why he liked me. You know, because I tried, and whenever he was around, he always knew that he was going to travel with me. You know, I'd pick him up at the airport. You know, I'd let him stay in my apartment. You know, and we became close.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And with Andre, the good news is if you tried to keep up with him, he was big enough to carry anybody home.
Oh, without a doubt.
You had to, right? I mean, but so he helped you kind of. I was going to ask like who was treated really well initially, and it sounds like that was Andre. That really, you know, he was the feature attraction that kind of traveled into the different territories as well. You know, like especially when they wanted a boost in their ratings, right?
Well, the way that he would like, I remember when I went to the AWA in Minnesota, which was a great territory. Also, I went there in 1980, towards the end of 1980, beginning of 81.
Yeah.
And you know that was a fantastic territory, and whenever Vern Gagne was the owner, he didn't run shows in the summer. In the summer, there was about 3 months there that we would only run maybe 7 or 8 matches the whole month. So we were off, like we had a normal life there. And then in October, once the summer was gone, Andre the Giant would come in and they would start battle royals all over the territory. All the cities would have battle royals. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you went from being half attendance, half full. All of a sudden, the places are jammed. You know, they wanted to see Andre the Giant. And then the rest of the winter, you know, business was good.
Yep, and he was the wonder of the world. I remember hearing those stories about how he was just that feature. So when you were at WWF originally, you were brought in, and then your first major program was Greg Valentine. Is that correct?
When the first time that I came in, that's when I got teamed up with Ivan Sputsky. And we became tag team champions, which, you know, I went from nobody knowing Tito Santana to all of a sudden, you know, I was a tag team champion at the WWF, which was big. I mean, I went to Japan and my money doubled, you know, just because I was the tag team champion in the WWF.
And tag team wrestling was really starting to, you know, get its going there. I feel tag team wrestling, I always said, is kind of the entry point for any young talent, because it's great to tag in, do a little work, tag out, get a little breather, watch firsthand, you know, how they do the crowd control storytelling. So I feel like, would you say that's good for a lot of rookies to start in with the tag team matches first?
Well, yes and no, because if you're in there with a guy who knows what they're doing, and that's your opponent, he can lead you and he can show you, you know, like when I first started, everybody was a good worker back then. And you know, they would tell me every move to make. You know, guys that were training me, they would call the whole match, and I would just follow what they said, and tag team match, you have a different psychology. You know, you got to get the crowd involved in a different way. You know, you want to have those false tags where you tag your opponent if you're a good guy, and the bad guy has got the referee occupied, so you don't, you know, he doesn't see the tag. You come in, you know, and you start to make a comeback, and the referee turns around and it sees you and gets you out. You got to learn all that psychology in a tag. It's a completely different ball game.
And especially back then, especially the fans would get into that because they would try to vouch for you. No, he made a tag, and that's when you really got him, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So you were the tag team champions, and then when did you decide to split off from that?
Well, I guess Vince McMahon Sr., I was pretty young. When I got to the WWF, I had only been wrestling 2.5 years. So that was pretty quick, you know, for a young guy to get to the and to be put in a main event step. And the Wild Samoans came into the territory. I don't know if you remember the Wild Samoans, Alpha and Sika, and those guys were mean looking. And I'd go watch them because I knew we were going to wrestle them and we were going to drop the belts to them. And I mean, they were scary, you know. And anyway, I had a match, my first match with them, quite a different experience. It looks like they're killing you, but you can barely, you know, feel them, you know.
Huh.
The work was so great, you know, it was unbelievable. So, yeah, we wrestled against them. We dropped the belts, and Vince McMahon Sr. Took me into his office, and he said, Tito, he said, you're a fantastic hand. He says, I would prefer for you to go and get experience somewhere else and then come back, you know, polished. He says, but if you want to stay here, you can stay here, but I'm going to have to beat you. You know, you're not going to go anywhere. So I said, no. Then I made him my booker. Every move I made after that,
yeah,
you know, I would call Vince, you know, and he was always there for me. He got me to the AWA, which was probably, like I said, the best territory because in the summer you had a normal life.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I have a promoter friend down in Carolina, and he said that the WWE farm system at the time would just send people to his area just to work on one thing, and then they'd send them somewhere else to work on something else, and kind of put a puzzle together. Is that kind of what you experienced?
Yeah, the promoters would just exchange talent.
Yeah.
You know, back then the territories were smaller. You know, if you were not on top, you'd stay there maybe a year. If you were on top, maybe you stay there a couple of years, and then, you know, the promoters, I mean, because there's territories all over the country, they would exchange the talent, you know, and, you know, once you became a top wrestler, you were a top wrestler pretty much everywhere.
Yep. And I remember him telling me some stories of, you know, him actually telling Dusty with a talent saying, oh, we just need him to brush up on this. And he would say, oh, he's not ready yet. And he's like, but we need him, you know, we need him in WWE, you know? And, and so it's just funny because I was like, wow, I never even thought about you go somewhere like you take English class in one area, you take math class, history class, you piece it all into one. So I was like, that makes sense. So
it was all a learning process. Yeah. I mean, you know, and if you're a good student, you pay attention.
So you were a good student. You learned, you went out to Minnesota, AWA, and then you made your way back to WWF. And that was back in 1983, I believe.
Yeah.
So, and then
May 10th, 1983. And the reason I remember May 10th is my birthday. So it's an easy way to remember when I started.
Nice.
My second round.
That's a good birthday gift then to get to go right back. And that was a little closer to home for you and, you know, everything. So, so how was the second entry into the WWE or WWF at the time compared to your first? Like, what did you know going back there and how was it different?
Well, this time, the first time I just came in and I started, you know, doing TV tapings. This time I was in Georgia, and they would bring me in to do two days of TV taping, and then I'd go back to Georgia. Then 3 weeks later, I would do 2 more days of taping. You know, we'd do 3 days, three tapes a on Tuesday and 3 tapes in Allentown and 3 tapes on Wednesday in I can't remember the other, Reading, Pennsylvania. But I came in as a top guy. And I came in wrestling, top wrestlers right off the bat. And before you know it, I'm having that intercontinental title match against Don Morocco. So, it was I came in as a star, that's how you would phrase it back then.
Yeah. And you came in, you got your title, and then the Intercontinental title, that was always the working man's title to get to the main event, right? Is that kind of how it was then?
Well, not necessarily to get to the main event. The Intercontinental title became at one point even more important than the world title. But you're right. The Intercontinental champion was usually a wrestler, and gave the fans a great wrestling match, with the heel and the baby face. Hulk Hogan was a fantastic champion, God rest his soul. But, he couldn't wrestle the way I could. He was 300 and some pounds, he had the charisma and how to get the fans. I don't have any jealousy of Hulk Hogan, because I feel like I was very lucky. We were together the first time I was in New York. Both of us were in the bottom in New York. Both of us went to the AWA Vern.
Yep.
From there on, before he started, he went to do the Rocky movie. When he came back, they tried to make him a heel, and the people just weren't buying it. They just kept cheering and cheering and cheering. And business went crazy.
Yeah.
He was selling out everywhere. And then from there, I ended up eventually coming back to New York. When I came back, he came back a few weeks later and became the champion in New York. So business went crazy in New York. So I made money just by being in the same territory as Hogan was.
Yeah. And that's, I always tell everybody, especially the fans, a lot of people are here today as fans because of Hulk Hogan and what he gave to the business in that sense. I know myself, I was drawn in by those guys, and then I would stay for the guys like you, right? Because I'm like, oh, wow, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And then you just open this whole world to yourself.
Right.
So
yeah, I always tell people, Hulk was the Elvis of professional wrestling. He did it. He was the man.
And he played the guitar like Elvis?
I never heard him play the guitar, to be honest with you.
It was a bass guitar, but so you got in WWE. You had a lot of really great matches. We get to WrestleMania 1, right? And you had the first ever WrestleMania match in the history of the sport against the Executioner, and you got a win. But was there any nervousness being that opening act in the very first WrestleMania?
No, because we were so primed. By that time, I was pretty good. I knew what I was doing. My opponent knew what he was doing. I don't know if you are familiar with what was going on with me at the time. Me and Greg the Hammer Valentine, we had the hottest feud in the WWF. We were selling out all over the country without Hulk Hogan on the card, the big cities. So when I find out that I'm going to be on WrestleMania 1 in the opening match, I was pretty disappointed. I thought I should have been in one of the main bouts, going up against Greg.
Yeah.
But it's not the way it was. So, I'm pretty upset. I didn't say nothing because, I knew there was still a lot of matches I had to go with Valentine. But there was a blue curtain that we would wait. You would get announced. You go into the garden. You go through the blue curtain, and Vince. By this time, Vince Jr. was running the show, and Vince came up to me and he says, "Tito, I just want you to know that the reason that you are on the first match is because I need you to get the people off their ass." He says, "You're going to set the tempo for the rest of the night. We're going to get it off on a good foot or a bad foot. And I have confidence in you." And man, that changed, the attitude that I had going into the ring. It made a big difference.
And, and that's how I seen it when you performed. I seen that and I said, yeah, he was the spark plug. He started it and got it going. And there was a good energy there. Circling back to what you said with Greg Valentine, you guys had a very hot feud. And I think that's why maybe Vince had some confidence in you. I actually talked to him a little while back, and when came talking about you, he said that whenever he worked with you, he felt like, in a compliment, it was the easiest night to work because in a good way, he always felt like, things really, it was easy for him to work with you. And, what was your thoughts on the overall?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with each other. We didn't even do much talking in the ring. We just, give and take. We had the longest feud in the history of the WWF. I mean,
yeah,
we wrestled each other for over 2 years. But I was chasing him for the title, and then when he was chasing me for the title, it was over 2 years. And Howard Finkel is the one that told us that that was the longest feud in the history of the WWF, and we did business until we had the cage match in Baltimore, and that was sold out. I mean, we just kept doing good business because, I don't know if you remember, I legitimately had knee surgery,
yep.
And Vince had the doctors there. And before I went into my surgery, I told the camera guys were waiting for me to come out of surgery. I told the guys, I said, as soon as I wake up, put the mic in front of me and ask me the questions, because I knew that, I was under the gas still, and I was going to sound groggy, and it would look legit, was legit, and I think I got a lot of sympathy from that.
Yeah, and actually, you say that, I'm like, yeah, that's the perfect way to do it, because you're legitimately buying into, wow, he was really out of it, and you really were under. So
right.
No, it's so Vince had confidence in you because the feud, and then you went into Mania and you started it. Did everybody know WrestleMania 1 was a success by the end of that night?
I don't know, because I don't think we had the numbers from across the country. We knew that the show that we delivered in Madison Square Garden was a success, but we didn't know the attendance, everywhere else. But, Vince McMahon was, I mean, there's never been a promoter like him. The guy knew what he was doing.
Yeah. Whenever I hear of people talk about the first time they meet Vince McMahon Jr., they always say there's an interesting story when they first get the first phone call from him, or they first meet him and they talk about their career. Was there any kind of, interesting facts that, when he helped initially guide your career?
Well, not really, because I met Vince Jr. when he was doing the interviews at ringside.
Yeah.
So he was, from what I understand, Vince had to put up the ring, for quite a while. He learned the business from the bottom up. He wasn't put in a good spot right away. He had to learn the business from the bottom. So I met him. We used to call him Vinny. The minute he took over, it became Vince. Nobody called him Vinny anymore.
Yeah, and I remember that suit you talked about he wore. It was like a Canterbury blue with a big WWF logo on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely you're taking me into retro, old school mode. You had a couple more WrestleManias under your belt. That's when you got into Strikeforce and you got into some tag team action over the next few years. And, how did that initial pairing start up? Whose idea was it to kind of go that route?
Well, Rick Martel was teamed up with Tom Zink. And I forgot the name that they gave him. They had a different name. But Tom Zink, I just cleared what happened. It wasn't good what happened to Tom Zink. He left overnight. It wasn't good, but I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not totally. I didn't hear it from him, so I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was gone. So Vince came to me and he says, "I'd like to team you up with Rick Martel and replace Tom Zink. I said, he said, are you for it? I said, yeah. So he says, I'd like to name you the Border Patrol. You know, he says, you from South Texas and Rick from Montreal, you know, the Border Patrol. And I told Vince, I said, Vince, you know, I'll do whatever you want. I said, the Border Patrol doesn't sound to me like a good name for us. I said, you know, at the time, I don't know, there was Mexicans who were crossing over on railroad cars that, you know, Arizona and Texas that were so hot that they were dying in the cars, of heat. And I said, that might turn me heel, you know, as a border, you know, with the things that were going on in our country. So he says, I think you're right. So the next TV we came up, he says, you guys are going to be Strike Force. And that's the way it was.
Nice. Yeah, I've never heard that origin story, so thank you. It's and you guys got together, and I believe it from the Can-Am connection, then all the way to becoming Strike Force, and then ultimately you guys were able to put on, I feel like, was a very technical tag team, but high-paced action. You know, I think that's kind of what I always got off of it as a fan. Like, would you say that was what you guys went for a lot with your matches?
Yeah, and both of us we were polished. You know, both of us knew what we were doing. Rick Martel and I had been tag team partners in the AWA, and we wrestled Greg Gagne and Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. They used to call them the High Flyers, and we did we had a feud.
Yep.
And we wrestled everybody like each other about 3 times around, and people, I mean, we were selling out arenas because people, you know, you can say what you want to say about Greg Gagne. You know who Greg Gagne is?
Yep, sure do.
I mean, Greg Gagne weighed maybe 210 pounds at the most.
Yeah.
But I mean, he had a mind for the business. I mean, he was a fantastic worker, and you know, I really learned a lot from him, you know, because he was the one that called the matches. I mean, we had as a babyface match, we were good guys, they were good guys. We went hour draws. I mean, we went 60 minutes, you know, and the fans were on their heels, you know. By the end of the match, you know, we had them right where we wanted them, you know, and we just kept, you know, coming back. And if you remember the endings, you know, I just heard Jake the Snake on a podcast talk about, you know, the endings were so well thought out that, you know, you just led in with the endings to another match, to, you know, ending to ending, and the endings were so good, you know, that made the whole big difference. And he says they don't do those endings anymore. I don't watch it anymore, so I couldn't tell you what they do.
Yeah, one of the things I miss about tag team wrestling now versus back then is tag teams looked like tag teams back then. They looked in unison. They had similar attire. They had double tag team moves, and I feel like the business has gotten away from that a little bit.
I mean, tag teams, they were hot. I mean, if the tag team went on before intermission, it was going to be hard for the main event to follow a tag team, because I mean the fans would go crazy. You know, the Road Warriors, the Demolition. I mean, and you can just go on and on and on. I mean, great tag teams.
When you worked with Martel and Strike Force, which tag team did you like opposing the most? Like, which ones did you guys like working with a lot and felt like was your best matches?
Oh God, I'm not sure that I preferred one over the other, but I know that we had a pretty good feud with the Islanders, King Tonga and his partner Tonga Kid.
Yep.
I mean, those guys were fantastic workers, and we just gelled. I mean, there again, you know, we had a bit of a feud, and we had return matches, and we had like hour matches, you know. And whenever you wrestle an hour match, people don't realize you lose 25, 30 pounds of water, you know, during the match.
Yeah, definitely, you know, and it goes in that endurance. So you had your WrestleMania match against Demolition. That's where things start to unravel a little bit for Strikeforce. Mr. Fuji gets involved a little bit. And then 1 year later, Strikeforce starts breaking up at WrestleMania 5, I believe, and Martel puts off. Was there kind of the plan post, what was the plan post breakup and kind of how that formulate and what would they want to do?
Well, the problem was we were in California and we had it was a pay-per-view, and Rick Martel walks into the arena and he tells Vince McMahon that his wife is sick and he needs to take some time off. So then that night, Vince says, "Oh, if you're going to take some time off, let's drop the belts to Demolition." So that's what happened. Rick's wife had some kind of health problems, and I don't know what they were. We never discussed it.
Yeah.
He didn't want to share it, so I didn't. Wasn't any of my business to ask him. So then it led up to the split, WrestleMania 5, and I wanted to be the heel. I asked Vince if I could be the heel, but little did I know, and it was never discussed with me, but when Rick Martel came in as the model, I put two and two together and I said, well, this just didn't happen overnight. This was planned for quite a while. So that was the reason that, Vince McMahon wouldn't turn me, heel. But I wanted a chance to be a heel and I never got it.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I was curious about that. If you were able to be a heel, how would you see that character evolving?
I would have. I think he would have rubbed off just from the split with Rick Martel. How it happened, and I think I would have. I think I would have been an arrogant heel, kind of like Mr. Perfect, Mr. Wonderful. That type of a sneaky heel, had to cheat to get the upper hand.
Yep.
But once I had the upper hand, I could control the match.
I could see. I always wondered that because you mentioned, you never did get that opportunity, and I was thinking about it. And I was like, man, that'd be interesting to see his approach and his character and where he would go with it. So, thank you on that. And you mentioned Mr. Perfect, and I know we have a question that'll be coming up on that. So, but what was your initial thoughts of working with Curt Hennig?
Well, Curt Hennig had his first match with me in the AWA.
Okay.
And from the first match, I mean, he was a natural. I mean, talk about being smooth. That guy was a fantastic worker, and he was good on the mic. He had a great future ahead of him. It was sad to see him go as young as he did.
Yeah, his ability to sell is something I always tell people to model themselves after. That's just, he was very good at making somebody look like they're doing some damage.
Right. Yep.
I want to go a little ahead here, and we're in Barcelona, Spain, and you get a match with The Undertaker, and you get to defeat The Undertaker live on TV. First time it's ever been done. How did it feel? What was the thoughts in the match? How was it to work with Mark Calloway at the time?
Well, the fact that we were wrestling in Barcelona, Spain, Hispanics, they brought me in a couple of days early before the show, and they gave me the key to the city, and they took me around town, and they introduced me to a lot of different areas of the town, and for me to beat The Undertaker, I kind of knew that there was something brewing, behind all this. There was going to be a great victory for me, and I was right, because I heard that at that time they were planning on putting the championship belt on me, and Vince was thinking about going into Mexico, South America, Central America, Spain. And I think when he found out the value of the peso compared to the dollar, I think he realized that there wasn't that much money to come out of Mexico, South America, Central America.
Yeah.
So they decided to X the idea of putting the belt on Tito Santana, and they ended up going with Bret the Hitman Hart.
And that was, when we're getting in the 90s, and you could feel like things were being planned. I was going to ask you about that, if there was ever discussion directly with you about, hey, you've been around a long time, you were well over with the fans, and I believe everybody also got along with you really well backstage. So you're a veteran presence at that, right in your prime still. Did they ever talk directly with you about that?
No. To this day, nobody. The first guy that I heard talk about it that I knew was legit was Bruce Pritchard, who was working in the office. He's the one that told me that they had plans on putting the belt on me, and then they changed their mind.
Well, at least he would be in that circle to know, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's got to make you feel good, though, that at least there was consideration in that they weren't just like, oh, he's here, right? So they.
Yeah. No. Vince McMahon. I used to get upset because I thought I was a great worker. I thought I was over with the fans. I thought he could have done more with me than he did. And I went to try to give him my notice several times before, and he says, Tito, I'm not done with you. He says, this is the bottom, this is the middle, this is the top. He says, you're always either in the middle or the top. You never come lower than the middle. He says, I use you on top, and then I use you to make some guys get some guys over to work with the champion.
Yeah.
And, because I was a good worker, I was able to put somebody over and still be over with the fans.
Yeah, because they never stopped cheering. Did you always feel like a great appreciation from Vince when you worked with him on those things and had those conversations?
Not really, because I wasn't getting what I wanted. I go in there all pissed off, and I'm ready to tell him off, and tell him to go screw himself, and he take over and start talking to me, and before you know it, I'm on cloud nine. He's making me feel so good, and then I leave I close the door on the office, and I stand outside. And I would say to myself, I didn't accomplish a damn thing with that conversation.
So I'm laughing because I've heard that Vince has a magic voodoo power in his office where you go in all hot and you walk out. And you said, he did it to me again. I'm happy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I heard it from Brett, and I heard it from several guys. He was great. I mean, and they all had it, Shane, Stephanie. I mean, they talk to you and they make you feel like you're the most important person in the world. I mean, They all got that.
It's an inherited genetic trait. And I heard a lot of people also had those conversations with Vince over gimmicks, right? Oh, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to wear polka dots for Dusty, right? And then he would have this way of influencing them into it. You were also influenced into a gimmick with El Matador, right? And I heard there was a lot of training with that. And, so if you want to kind of tell us kind of how did that start, and how did in the 90s, everybody I felt like had to have a job in their character. Right?
Well, when he told me that he wasn't quite done with me, excuse me, he says, do you mind going to Mexico and training to be a matador? He says, I want to give you one more push. And I said, Vince, if you're going to give me another push, I'll go to Mexico. So I went he rented the whole stadium in Tijuana, and I was there for, I think, a couple of weeks training, and finally got a bullfight with a small bull. I wouldn't get in with a real bull, but and we did some vignettes, and I was supposed to come out with a big angle with a big feud with the $1 Million Man, and he started doing vignettes about really trashing Tito Santana, and they started playing my vignettes, and before you know it, I started my TVs, and I think we're going someplace, and then all of a sudden, boom, squashed.
Yeah. I remember the vignettes because I remember $1 Million Man was visiting old neighborhoods and filming,
right?
Saying that's your house and doing all this stuff. And so Vince sent you to Tijuana to train to actually be a bullfighter. I find that amazing.
Yeah,
renting out an arena, getting a bull. I mean, that's just, to me, is a commitment beyond, what my child mind thought because I just thought, oh, cool, it's a bullfighter. And, you know, I was into that. And I knew Tito Santana, of course. But I just, that's that next level effort that a lot of promoters, you know, I don't think did in that era, right?
Well, they didn't have the money to spend, or they weren't willing to spend, you know.
Yeah.
I heard that I think he spent like $500,000 that week, or two that I was there, to rent the arena and to get the trainers to train me.
So did you walk out there feeling like you really could bullfight a real bull?
No, there's no way that I'd want to. Those real bulls, man.
Yeah.
One more was enough.
Hey, I had friends years ago that wanted to do the running with the bulls, and I was like, no, I'm good. I'll watch from the side. And
yeah, I just can't believe how intelligent they are to get run over, you know, by the bulls.
Yeah. So, you know, you made the El Matador debut. I feel like it was a fun success. It was, you know, fun to watch you refresh your career and refresh your character. Did the push go how you felt it would go, or did it, you know, exceed?
No, pretty much when he changed his mind of me being the world champion, I started putting top guys over, you know. And if you're going to be in a top feud, you're not going to be putting anybody over. You know, when the feud's done, you put guys over, but not before you even have a feud. So I never really had a feud with anybody as El Matador. So it never went anywhere.
Yeah.
And before you know it, the WWF was going through a transition. You know, I found myself in Montreal. Me and Sergeant Slaughter were the only ones in the locker room. There were the legends, the veterans that were there. Hulk was gone. Everybody was gone. And me and Sarge, and I said I didn't travel with Sarge, so I didn't have anybody to travel with. And I thought that night, and the next day we flew into Newark and drove to Connecticut, and we were doing interviews for the, you know, like we used to do interviews for the upcoming matches.
Yeah.
And I went in and I gave Vince my notice and gave him a 2-week notice. And, you know, in reality, that was the best thing I ever did, was give him my notice.
Yeah. And just to follow up, how was the initial feeling? And then long term, I know you said that was pretty good, but was there a plan after that 2 weeks? You know, did you have a next plan in mind at the time?
No, I did not have a plan. As a matter of fact, I hadn't even discussed it with my wife that I was going to quit. I got home because I had a show that night in Pennsylvania. Then I drove home, and we were in bed because my wife was in bed by the time I got home. And I told her, I said, you know, I gave Vince my notice. I got, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be done with the WWF. And her response was, I'm happy for you. She says, you know, you're going to have your life back, because she knew how hard we worked. We were always on the freaking road, and we're working hard, and, you know, a lot of stress. And she goes, you're going to have your life back. And she goes, I live in a pretty nice home. And she says, if we have to sell the house, we'll sell the house. So when she said that, I said, oh, she's got my back, you know. I mean, you know, no problems. Because on my way to Pennsylvania, after I gave him my notice, I broke down into tears because I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, I said, and I prayed to God, you know, and I said, God, do with me whatever you want to do. I said, all I ask is that I am able to keep my family with the same lifestyle they have. You know, they've had a pretty good lifestyle. I said, it's not their fault, you know, that they have had it so good. I don't want them to lose that. And then when I discussed it with my wife, and she was with me, and, you know, one thing led to another, and, you know, things have been fantastic for me, you know, ever since.
I'm so happy to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. That's just an amazing story. You know, it made me reflect on my own family. And I remember, you know, I traveled a lot from my career, and I remember being like, hey, I think I want to find something closer to home and stay at home and be around a little more. And my wife just looked at me and said, you know what, you deserve that. You've done so much, and like, you deserve to have some time to relax a little and just enjoy. And I was I understand where you're coming from on that. So that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear that for you. So retirement life has been really good. You enjoyed, that time that you were given. And then the WWE Hall of Fame comes calling in 2004, right? How does that phone call come in? What does it feel like? Are you shocked when you get it? Are you totally surprised when they make that call to you? And what's the ceremony?
Yeah, I was totally surprised because I went to, I think in 1999, they had a Hall of Fame in Baltimore. Pedro Morales was inducted, and Bobo Brazil, and a couple of other guys. But, in a hotel, restaurant, and it was a real small thing. And when Howard Finkel was the one that called me, I hadn't done anything with the WWF for a while, so I right away I was going to say no until I asked him how much we were going to get paid. And when he told me how much we were going to get paid, I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm interested." and it turned out to be the best thing that I ever did. I mean, I had not followed wrestling, so Vince McMahon flew, I don't know how many members of my family from Texas. He got us 5 hotel rooms I think we were staying at the Hyatt or something, a real nice hotel in New York.
Yeah.
And sent 2 limousines to pick us up. And when we got to New York, and I saw people from all over the world that were there, that were just waiting to see who was going to get out of the limousines. And when I got out of my limousine, they just ran to get my autograph. I said, man, this thing is not like it used to be. It was a completely different ball game.
Yeah. And then they honored you that night, and, they took you through the evening. Was the speech, did you feel like just excited to give that speech, or were you like, let's get through the speech, or what was the idea on that?
Well, my wife asked me, he says, all the guys had pages of notes, and I didn't have any notes. And my wife says, do you know what you're going to talk about? And I said, not yet. I said, but I know what I'm going to do. I said, I'm going to thank everybody because I'm grateful for a good career. So I'm going to thank everybody, including Vince, and I thank my wife, and my mom. My mom was there. Thank God she was still alive. And, I gave my wife credit because we were on the road so many days a month, and I almost broke down, trying to finish my speech, giving her thanks for what she did.
And then, that was a great way to kind of cap off the career and honor you. To kind of cap off everything here with you, Tito, I would like to take some questions from the fans, if that's all right, and kind of get you to answer a few. So we'll go ahead and we'll take our first question here. We'll see it come up. So first up is, what was it like being in the ring with Mr. Perfect? And are there any fun memories you have of Curt Hennig? That's from Todd Dilly on Twitter X.
Well, Mr. Perfect was a fantastic worker. I mean, if not the best, I would say, because Jake the Snake was fantastic. Mr. Wonder, I mean, Piper, everybody was so good back then.
Yeah.
But he was so easy. That you were not going to get hurt. You were going to have a good match. But he also used to like to rib people. But thank God that he never ribbed me. I was lucky enough to see the ribs to other guys, which I didn't like some of those ribs, but they weren't to me.
So I have to ask. I was going to ask if he ever got you, but you answered that. So, what was one of the funniest or craziest ribs you've seen him do?
Oh my God!
Just a few, right?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I right now I've had so much on my head that I've been talking about.
Yeah.
Nothing comes, nothing's coming across.
Yep. Well, I will say this, if guys, Todd, especially if you Google it, you're going to get all kinds of stuff out there on the internet. So definitely,
Right. Yeah.
you're going to find all kinds of Mr. Perfect stories. Let's go to our next question. You've had a great career, but if you could have done one thing differently, what would it have been? And that's Glenn from the Philippines.
Well, if I would have done one thing differently, I probably wouldn't have stayed in the business as long as I did. I missed quite a few things. My kids growing up. I will regret that, until I die. So that is one of the things that I would do completely different.
No, good answer. But, I always say that's an act of love, though, when you do those things to support the family. So
Yep.
Let's go to the next one. What is your opinion of, there's a new wrestler named LA Knight. So they're asking, what is your opinion of LA Knight? And that's Leighton Jennings 5. And with the hashtag, #revolution. Are you familiar with LA Knight?
I have to apologize to everybody, but I don't watch wrestling. So I couldn't tell you who is in the WWF, who is in the AEW, who is, I just don't, not that I have anything against wrestling, is that, I'm retired, I'm busy at home, and I like all other sports. I love baseball, football, basketball. I mean, I watch sports all day long.
Yep. I'm curious, who's your favorite football team?
Well, without a doubt, I wore the Kansas City uniform, so
Okay.
Kansas City Chiefs, have a piece of me. I live in New Jersey, so I like the Giants and the Jets. Unfortunately, they both lost.
Yep.
The only New York team to win was Buffalo. I think Buffalo is going to go a long way this year.
I think they're going to go very far this year. I'll admit it. I'm a Browns fan. We have our struggle. We're the underdog, but
yeah, I mean, you never know this year. I mean, I watched. I have the red zone, and they're pretty even. Nobody got killed. They all lost pretty close games.
Yeah, and the Ravens-Bills game was the game of the week for me. That was insane.
I went to sleep. I wasn't able to stay awake, so I was surprised that the Bills came back. I was happy that they came back, but I was surprised.
Let's go ahead to our next question. Big fan from the 80s. Did the feud with Greg the Hammer Valentine really spill into real life? It seems like you were at each other's throats. And that's from the Cowboy Reg, Irish Cowboy 88 on Twitter X.
No, as a matter of fact, Greg Valentine and myself are very fond of each other. Greg will tell people that he made more money working with me than anybody else. And he worked with Hulk Hogan, and he had a lot of big feuds himself. But, the fact that we went for so long on top as the main event, me and Greg Valentine to this day, we remain good friends and grateful for the time that we spent in the ring together. I mean, I used to come home, and tell my wife I've been in easier street fights, after our matches were over, because we used to beat the crap out of each other in the ring, and that's why we sold tickets, because people bought into our feud.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for the question. We'll go to the next. Always thought Bobby Heenan added bits for Tito and not others. What was Tito's relationship with Heenan? What did he think of Heenan's commentary working for him?
Well, Bobby Heenan, don't call me Chico, Jesse the Body Ventura.
Yep.
I met those guys when I went to the AWA and became good friends with both of them. And, whenever they would insult me, they would get me over. You couldn't do that anymore. Now you couldn't insult, somebody like they did and got away with it. So no, I made Bobby Heenan rest in peace. It was so sad to see him at the end of his life, and I still remain friends with Jesse the Body.
Yeah, and something's to be said. The commentators do such a great job of telling the story of what's happening. I did want to ask real quick, how did you said your book, actually, Don't Call Me Chico, which can be found at TitoSantanaOfficial.com, as you guys see down there, the address for Tito's webpage. You got your book there, and I know, is Jesse Ventura the originator of Chico, that name?
Right.
Okay, so was there a story to why he started that, or he just started kind of on his own doing it?
No, he just started doing it on his own. He was a master with interviews. I mean, they both were. I mean, who was better than either one of them?
And it definitely, added to your career, and even added to the title of your book, again, at TitoSantanaOfficial.com. I believe that is all of our questions here. Before I would like to get into our final thoughts, I always like to end these shows with a quick question of just any life advice you would give any other human being. I always like to get that from anybody I have on the show. So just any life advice you'd give anybody, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, personally, I'm a Christian. I am not a preacher like Ted DiBiase. I'm not over the hill. I just like to go to church. When I go to church, I pray. I feel better when I leave. I feel good knowing that, God has been good to me. I was a migrant worker. If you read my book, I started out as a migrant worker, to where I am today. And I believe that I owe it all to God, and I pray every night, during the day, whenever I travel, it's good to believe in something, and I believe in the good Lord, and that's me,
No, thank you so much for answering that. That always means a lot to me when I can get that from someone. What's the best way fans can interact with you on social media, or what's the best way to kind of?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I have two pages. One is I think Merced Solis, and the other one is Tito Santana. I think I have, there's two different ways. My personal page, and then I have a guy that runs my Facebook. It's I'm losing my mind because I can't think of the title of my Facebook is.
It's the Tito Santana Official Facebook.
Yeah, Tito Santana Official Group. I think it's official group.
Okay.
So yeah, if there's more room, because I'm pretty much tapped out with my 5,000 tapped out, and I think that's all they allow me to have. But the other one, the official Tito Santana group, that's what it is. The official Tito Santana group. There's a lot more room there.
Awesome, guys. Go follow them over there at Facebook. Tito, again, thank you so much for coming on today. I'd like to end with an official Arriba, if that's okay.
Arriba!
Arriba! Thank you, Tito. Have a great evening.
Thank you. You're welcome.